Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week, if everything goes to plan, the nose cone will be finally part of the car. Okay guys, well it seems like people are finally beginning to understand the concept that the whole front of this car is actually welded together, not bolted on like most other cars. This is all integral to the structure of the car, and the only way to realistically get the engine in and out is through the top. There is no easy other way to do it. That's just how it's going to go. So what I'm going to do now is pull it all apart again and start getting it all ready to sort of weld the nose on. The headlight buckets are not in there and things like that, so I need to sort of work out exactly where they want to go beforehand and just sort of make a bit of a plan moving forward. But the first thing is to strip it back down again and have a look at a couple of little bits I just need to touch up first. Okay, so before I can completely button up the entire front end, I need to get rid of this horrible patch that's just down here, and there's a spot of rust just in here on this this area. So I'm going to patch in the edge of this rail here, and also I want to also cover up the end of that square tube that I put on previously. That's all open and exposed now, so obviously I want to seal that all in, and I want to seal that in on both sides. But first things first is let's cut out this bottom corner and remake this section so that it's looking a little bit prettier than that ugly mess that's there at the moment. All right, so I've got my my little patch piece. I made it do a bit of a step in so that it can step into the end of the tube and just sit in there quite nicely, and I'll seal that all in a minute. But before I tackle that, there's inside here, there's a bit of pitting and there's a little bit of rust in spots. It's still a nice solid piece, it's just some pits and stuff. So instead of trying to recreate everything, I'm going to go through, I'm going to weld them up now, weld up all the rust holes and stuff from the inside, and make sure it's nice and neat and solid, and then I can seal it all in for good. All right, that's looking really good. Both ends are completely capped in now, so just to seal it in, stop most of the moisture and stuff getting in there. There is still access through bolt holes and things like that, but it's just more to not keep it open permanently. And now the next thing is to actually start lining up the nose cone. So the rest of it is I'm quite happy with. It's looking good. So let's get the nose cone out and see if we can actually get it to fit the car and start trimming and getting it ready to weld on. So I've got the nose cone on here, and I'm not sure how well the camera's picking it up, but these body lines don't match at all. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to scribe onto the nose cone where these body folds need to go, and see if I can start panel beating them and just massaging it all into place so that the guards meet up with the nose cone and the whole thing just goes together nicely. So let's start doing some hand panel beating. All right, the corners are looking much nicer now. I've sort of panel beated it into a better shape that's closer to the actual shape it's supposed to be. It's still not perfect, but basically the way I'm going to tackle it is I'm going to trim it off exactly where I need it to be, and start tacking along certain bits, and then just sort of panel beat it as I go, getting it into shape as it sort of wraps around, because it's going to take a little bit to sort of get this to blend nicely, and might be a bit of backwards and forwards, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start trimming at least the top section of this, just so that I can sort of start clamping it into place, and clamp and then mark and fettle it, just to get everything sort of as lined up as I can. I've got my my bonnet in reasonably well with my spacers on it to get my panel gaps around the edge of the bonnet right. They're not perfect, they're going to take some more adjusting later, but I sort of need it together to get everything finished. So, all right, let's start grinding and cutting. All right, so I'm just putting this together. I'm using some butt weld clamps, and I just thought I'd go through these things quickly because it's something that I made up a few years ago when I was working on Harry, my Orange 911, and they're sort of quite a handy little piece of gear if you're going to be doing this panel work, and it's also a simple little project you can do at home. Basically, what it is, I got some screws that have a wing nut on them. Basically, that's just the basic little unit. I think these screws are probably about 15 mil long, probably. And what I did with these screws is I cut out these little bits of sheet metal with drilled a hole in them, and welded them onto the top of the screws. So sort of sat them in the slot of the screw and welded them on, and you've got this little odd looking thing here. And then I got some square tubing and just cut them into little squares, drilled a hole in one side and cut a slot in the other side. And basically what happens is you stick your little contraption together. When you wrestle with it and you stick your screw and your tab into the piece of square tubing and do your wing nut up on the other side, and then I've just got some little pieces of rod, the right size for your hole. You drill your hole for the rod. Basically how you use them is you poke your this tab in between the two sheets of metal, and then from the underside, or you can go up from underneath and put it through the top, you poke your piece of metal through and then tighten the clamp down, and you can end up holding two bits of metal together. I'll show you here exactly how they go together. So you can see here, this one is been poked up from underneath, and tightened up, and here's one on the top. The little rod is underneath the 2 sheets of metal, and when you tighten them up, it holds the sheets together in a nice, with a nice little gap you can MIG together. Not as good for TIG because the gap is a bit big. TIG, you really want to try and butt weld them hard. I'm going to see how I go with this. I would like to TIG it, but I might end up MIGging it just because it's simpler to get it together this way. So I'm going to keep going now, add a few more of these butt weld clamps and see if I can start joining this piece together. I'm getting there stitching this together. I'm having a similar problem as I had on the rear panel on the back. Because this panel, I believe, is pressed, because it's pressed from a flat sheet, the edges have been stretched a lot more than the middle. So the middle is much thicker. By the time it actually wraps around the edges, it's actually stretched out quite a bit, so it's a lot thinner, and I'm blowing through a lot. And also, obviously, this front corner has been worked so much and ground back and all the rest of it. So I'm dealing with 2 very thin sheets, so I'm getting a lot of ugly blasted through welds, but it's getting the structure there, and I'm slowly tying it together. I'm just sort of gradually working my way along. One of the big tricks with that I've learnt the hard way after quite a few years with putting the bits of sheet metal together is you need to make sure every single step of the way they are perfectly in line. When I first started, I thought, oh, well, like they're just a little bit out or whatever, just zit, 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 all the way along. The trouble is then you end up getting these steps that are just a nightmare to get rid of later. You really want to just, as you go along, the metal is going to be up or down slightly. You just need to tweak it and get it right, and it'll make your life much easier. So, all right, let's keep going. All right, so we're getting there with this welding up, but I realised I'd forgotten to actually grind back the paint on the inside down the bottom where I'm going to be welding this, where that panel I put in last week will join up with this bottom front lip. So I managed to get in there and get the metal nice and clean, and gave it a coat of weld-through primer. Now I'm going to keep going down the side, and I'm just trimming and flexing and making sure everything's sort of lining up nicely. I have clamped down the bottom. I've used some of these spring clamps to hold the bottom exactly where I want it. I put the bolts back in the front, so everything is lining up roughly where I want it, and I'm just going to go down now and just make sure everything is smooth and just trim and weld as I go, getting it all nice and neat and tidy. Let's keep going. All right, so I've got this all looking reasonably good now. I'm pretty happy with the shape, and I've ground back the spot MIG welds I've put on down all the way down. I'm going to try now to TIG weld it up. Now it's going to be difficult because the steel is really thin. It's really easy to blow through, and I'm not that good at TIG welding, but I like the finish of the TIG weld better. The MIG weld makes a much more brittle, much harder weld, needs a lot more grinding. The TIG weld's much neater and more delicate, but I'm not that great at it, so we'll see how it goes. If I'm just blasting through all the time, I'll just switch back to MIG and just MIG the whole thing up, but we'll give it a crack. All right, because the metal was so beaten up and split, the welds are definitely not the prettiest. I still need to go through and panel beat and get this nice and flat, but it's all joined up, it's all TIG welded, and it's actually looking not too bad. This top section was really thin where it's been beaten out, and took quite a bit of patching and blowing holes and filling holes, and it's messy, but that is now all connected on that side. Except for this this wedge in the bottom where I'm going to have to build a panel from where I cut off the old one and where the new one actually connects up to. That's easy enough, I can make that piece. But let's go over to the other side now and do the same thing again on the other side. All right, and this side turned out much better. It's still not pretty. My TIG welding definitely needs a lot to be desired, and also it was still very thin metal. You can see where there's some big lumps where I had to sort of build up the metal, but it's still a much smaller weld than it would have been if it was a MIG, and it's also it's much softer than the MIG would be. So I'm going to hit that back with the flat disc now and just see if I can tidy this up a bit and give it a bit of a panel beat and see if I can get it sitting nice and flat and smooth and shining. All right, that takes a fair bit of time going through and TIG welding all that, but actually now that it's got a coat of weld through primer on it, looks pretty good. I love that spot welder. It's so good, so quick and easy going along that bottom edge and just spot welding it on. That took 5 minutes, if that, whereas the rest of this has taken many hours to get to this stage. Now, as I said, it's looking quite good. This side is definitely much better than that side. It is not completely welded on. There are still these little patches, corners in here I've got to fix up. I still haven't welded on the top inside here, so there's still more to do, but the guards are welded to the nose cone. We have liftoff. We have a good start. So that is all the time I have this week, unfortunately, but that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hi guys. In 1967, alongside building the Alfa Romeo Tipo 33, Autodelta was also building a road-going version. The 33 Stradale, or road-going, was one of the world's first supercars. The body, designed by Franco Scaglione and built by Carrozzeria Marazzi, is one of the most beautiful cars ever built. And it was also one of the first production vehicles to feature dihedral, or butterfly doors. It was powered by the race-bred 2-litre flat-plane crank V8 with twin-cam and twin-spark heads. The dry-sump engine revved to 10,000 RPM and made 240 horsepower. At the time, it was the fastest production car ever produced over the standard kilometre and did 0 to 100 in under 6 seconds. It was also the most expensive vehicle for sale to the public at 9.7 million lira, which compared at the time to the Lamborghini Miura, which was for sale for only 7.7 million lira. Only 18 examples were ever produced, and their current value in today's dollars would be well in excess of 10 million.
All right, well, I didn't get the entire nose welded on today, but I got a fair way there, and progress is a good thing. We are getting there, slowly.
Some nose is better than no nose.
We actually have finally some new Alfarrari merch. Lots of you have been asking for it, and thanks to Emil, who's Precision Drawn on Instagram. He contacted me, and he's done a bunch of work actually coming up with the designs. I've sort of given him a bit of direction, and he's run with it, and they're really good. So I'll put some pictures up here, and you can see they're good. So follow the link in the description, go and get some merch. If you are interested,
Please like and subscribe and let us know what you think. And we will see you
next time. And you can see him even earlier if you get us on Patreon. All right, guys.
Indeed.
See you next time.
And built by Carrozzeria Marazzi. The body built by Carrozzeria Marazzi. Okay. Oh, God. Race bred 2-litre flat plane crank head. It was powered by the 2-litre flat race cam with twin head cams and sparks. 2-litre no. Yes. All right.
Guys.